Okay, so today we are expanding into kind of the expansion of Islam itself. So in the previous video, we talked kind of the beginnings of Islam. We talked about kind of the background and the main beliefs of it with the Prophet Muhammad. And so today we're going to really expand on that and kind of, again, talk about things that lead up, not really getting to the 1200 mark yet, but we're still building into that area of this really important background knowledge and things that you are going to see a lot of throughout the rest of the course in relation to Islam prior to really the year like 1800. So a lot of this stuff is going to be very much important to kind of remember and to look back on. All right. Our essential questions today are to analyze the different ways Islamic rule and culture expanded, and then to explain life under Islamic rule. So hopefully we can do this in one video. It's okay if it takes two. Well, we're going to find out. But yeah, this is what we're talking about today is Dar al Islam, which definition of is lands that are just under Islamic rule. All right. So as we can see here, here is our expansion of Islam itself. All right, so it starts here in the Arabian Peninsula in modern-day Saudi Arabia. So there's Mecca, the holiest site within Islam, Medina, the second holiest, where the religion really expanded. And so right after the Prophet Muhammad dies, like 2 years after they retake Mecca, after he'd been forced out about a decade earlier, we talked about kind of the breakdown of, the leadership stuff within, the Sunnis and the Shia. But for the most part, there is, for the first couple decades afterward, what they call the territoriate, or the first four caliphs up until like 1661. It's Sunni and Shia. There's no real big distinction at this point between them. And they expand throughout much of the Middle East, the Arabian Peninsula into Persia and Iran, even into parts of the Caucasus Mountains, Israel, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, all the way into Libya and almost into Tunisia, actually, which is actually really, really impressive within the span of 30 years after the Prophet dies. All right. And a lot of this is aided by the fact that there's a lot of just internal conflict within a lot of these regions. And not a whole lot of standing opposition in their way. And so over time, as different caliphates, which are just the people that are in charge of Islam in itself, in a sense supposed to be the religious and political leaders of the Dar al Islam, or just areas within it, and it actually breaks up into smaller groups, struggle to kind of hold on and to expand different territories. And so the first group, known as the Umayyad caliphs, who are in charge until 750. They move the capital away from Mecca into Damascus, and they hold on to power until 750. And you can kind of see the areas that they help lead the spread into India, Afghanistan, the rest of North Africa, into Morocco, and also into Spain. And then they are overthrown in 750 by the Abbasid Caliphate, which is based in Persia. So again, you have Persian Muslims now. As it's expanding, you get all these different cultural groups within Islam. And so the Abbasid Caliphate takes over, moves the capital to Baghdad, but also you get various breakdowns in it. So they struggle to hold on, but essentially Islam itself as a religious and cultural phenomenon will continue to spread and maintain throughout these different areas. Just there's no one direct Islamic ruler throughout all of Dar al Islam. They try, and it doesn't work again, as we can see here, or as ever written down. Poor leadership at various points. Just there's a lot of distance in between them. Same thing that's going to affect the Roman Empire. We talked about them yet, but they're collapsed at this point. Warfare, and then just in itself, Islamic rule becomes stable in these various areas in local communities. All right, so during the high points of the caliphates, which we'll talk about a little bit here, major cities are centers of learning. They're centers of trade, culture, and wealth, which leads to an expansion of places like Baghdad and Damascus. But most of the Islamic world is very decentralized. One in particular is Al-Andalus, which is going to be essentially Spain and parts of Portugal that are under Islamic rule, or parts of it, for almost 700 years, which is something that you're going to watch a video on that on your own time, but it's definitely well worth a look. All right. So Islamic armies spread the control and reach of the caliphates. However, the religion itself doesn't exactly spread as fast as the armies, or at least the number of people who convert to Islam does not actually happen right away. All right, it takes several centuries in many cases for Islam to continue to spread as a religion, even in the areas that they have conquered. All right, so the army's expanded, but that doesn't lead to mass conversion, at least not right away. Areas are very slow to convert to Islam, and usually starts with a political marriage of someone to a Muslim trader or a Muslim prince or caliph or someone higher up in one of the administrations, looking for a political connection or looking for safety, and that's kind of more of their tie-in, is that political connection, the money connection, the social status benefits. And it's aided and supported by Muslim religious leaders, but for your vast majority of your people, they are a lot slower to take on the religion. And so that falls under the role of this group that we're going to come back and talk about a lot during these different areas when we talk about different parts of the world, especially within Africa, within India, Southeast Asia, Indonesia. And those are the Sufi mystics or missionaries, the people that spread the spiritual beliefs within Islam. And these are the people that really are the reason for why Muslims or why people convert to Islam, is more because of the Sufi missionaries than because of advancing armies. Yes, the advancing armies kind of, mention the religion, so do the traders. But if you're not a wealthy person, if you're not looking to get, a lot of social or economic or political benefits, if you're just kind of your average day like farmer, you have no real reason to convert to Islam. There's no incentive because most people aren't necessarily forced to. And we'll talk about that, the whole part of, people that choose not to convert on the next slide. So the Sufis are able to encourage conversion because they are more willing to tie into local spiritual connections. They're the ones doing more of the home body community work day in and day out, year in and year out, forming their own schools. They're building schools. They're doing other community supports, helping with the poor, community drives, things like that. So they're in there and showing the kindness and the spirituality within Islam. But they also really syncretize Islam. And so if you remember with AP Human Geography, if you took that, we mentioned the word syncretism during the religion unit. We didn't necessarily define or really use syncretism all that often, at least I didn't. But within AP World, you begin to see that a lot, especially within Islam, that the Sufis are willing to syncretize Islam with local religion and local spiritual beliefs. And so that way, other deities, other beliefs of, that tie in more towards, the more local culture are accepted within it. And so as long as they are, still believing in the Prophet Muhammad and, Allah, which is the Muslim word for God, as long as they are still believing with that, even with other different beliefs that would actually, if you, study the Quran and the other things, it would come into conflict. But, they're like, well, if their heart is in the right place and they are practicing and truly believing in Muhammad and Allah, then that's okay that they have these other backgrounds, these other beliefs, and that's acceptable within the Sufi system. All right, so there's a higher acceptance of cultural differences and backgrounds that would be completely against the doctrines of Islam, but not the spiritual belief for them. All right, so they focus on, again, education. They focus that it's okay to music and dancing, and you just kind of, if you feel the religion and it makes you move, that is acceptable. This comes into conflict with a lot of more strict adherence with the more conservative types of Islamic religious leaders and spiritual leaders who are not necessarily a big fan of Sufi mystics. And this comes into a lot of conflict later on, something we're going to revisit. So all this encourages conversions over time because of good works, because of leading by example, because of allowing you to still have local cultural beliefs, allows Islam to expand and take hold in ways in which Judaism, Judaism and Christianity did not have. All right, now this leads obviously to discrepancies within Islamic practice and views. When we talk about a guy like Ibn Battuta, in a few chapters from now, he is an Islamic scholar and he is abhorred by a lot of the practices he sees in areas within just sub-Saharan Africa, places like Mali and Ghana, but also into a few other locations where the practice isn't as strict on the dogma, on the doctrines of Islamic beliefs. So there is that, and again, we'll take a look at those and other things. So the Sufis are something we're going to come up and visit a lot, as well as kind of the discrepancies and the mixtures and how that leads to mass conversions to Islam in other places. So this is something we're going to definitely hit back on. In terms of the treatment of non-Muslims and of women, So I just wanted to put this onto one slide. So treatment of pagans are people who don't necessarily have a I don't remember the exact definition of pagan at this point. I'm sorry about that. But polytheist people that believe in numerous gods are often forced to convert, depending on where you are, and slowly lose their own practices. Now, that depends on, again, if you are coming into contact with a lot of Sufi mystics or missionaries. If not, then you might be forced to convert, especially early on within the Arabian Peninsula. Places, again, like sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, those are more accepting, or those people are, or those Muslims are more accepting of those other religions, but within the Arabian Peninsula, that stuff goes out quickly. In terms of the people of the book, that's kind of the word that Muslims use for Jews and Christians. Often treated pretty well because, again, of that connection to Judaism and to Christianity and the similar beliefs that are already spread out, similar peoples like Abraham, Isaac, Moses, Jesus, a lot of similar stories within that. So they're often told to respect and to, these are similar people. They're not our people, but you have to respect them. You have to respect their beliefs. And are often treated very, very well. They're not forced to convert in most cases. There are obviously issues with that, and yes, there are conflicts, both current and historic, between Jews and Christians with Muslims. But in most places, especially early on, there isn't as much violence and fighting between these groups. In fact, in many cases, Jews and Christians often encourage Muslims to take over, depending on who's in charge, and you get to see various issues of that. And so we're also going to see conflict come here too. But two big things that come out of the treatment of the Jewish and Christian peoples in most Muslim areas, or Muslim-controlled areas within Dar al Islam. Jewish and Christian leaders, so rabbis, priests, are essentially put in charge of their own people. So they are allowed to follow their own religious customs, their own religious laws, as long as it doesn't come into conflict with Muslim doctrine or Muslim laws. So if there's an issue within the Jewish community, like a Jewish person kills another Jewish person, Islamic authorities aren't going to handle that if the Jewish people feel like they can handle it. Same thing with like religious practices. Jews and Christians are free to practice the way that they are supposed to adhere to, and the Muslims are not supposed to get involved with that. And in some cases, Jews and Christians are able to rise into high ranks within certain Muslim societies. And so, this does often, again, within conservative Muslim feelings as well as conservative Christian and Jewish groups, this leads to some resentment and conflict, obviously, and tension. But in many cases, for certain periods, this leads to a lot of peace and prosperity, but not, again, always. And that video on Al-Andalus is going to be a good examination of that. The jizya tax is something to definitely hit on and remember, and that's the tax on non-Muslims living in Islamic lands. So if you were a Jew or a Christian within part of that millet system, in order to continue to live there, you have to pay a tax in order to live there and not be forced to convert. So if I was a Jewish person living in Saudi Arabia at this time, I would have to pay a tax for being Jewish and not a Muslim. All right, and then we're going to end here on women, and then we will finish up the next stuff on the next presentation. So women, and a lot of this goes back to more Arab practices that were then carried over to the religion. So women could own property. They had the right to divorce and do that on their own volition. They didn't have to get like a religious doctrine or like your kind of religious support for it. If they felt like they had the means to divorce and had adequate reason, they could do it. They had the right to spend their own money and own their own businesses. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't restrictions and that there weren't things that they've kind of lost over time, but this is all still fairly true in most Muslim societies. Okay? Even though women could divorce, men were allowed to marry several wives, and that kind of goes with the Prophet Muhammad, because he, I think, had 4 or 5 wives at any one time, but his favorite wife also was a business owner, so that practice continued. Women are not allowed to marry more than one man. So, again, there's kind of that contradiction within there. But at the same time, as we talk about, these advancements that really you don't see in a whole lot of other cultures at this time, and especially patriarchal societies where men are dominant, women are still needed to be seen as needing protection. So you talk about societies even today where women are not allowed to leave the house without a male guardian who is of their own family, a brother, a son, uncle, cousin. They have to, again, the field to need to be protected, and also for, female modesty to wear, in this case, a hijab, which is a veil, or the full body one, which is the burqa. And again, that varies based on Islamic society. Some women view it as empowering and a way to kind of adhere their beauty. Others find that more restrictive. So Again, these are just kind of laying out ideas. So we're going to stop here and finish up with the next video.